Welcome, both of you. So this should be fairly straightforward. I know because of Memorial Day last week, we didn't get a chance to have a meeting. So I just wanted to catch up on where some things were from both of y'all's perspective, and I can share some of the stuff that I've got as well. But just since we didn't really get much of a chance to talk last week, how's the Docker hacking going?
Yes, so I just posted a status on the Jira link just a few seconds ago. If you can just scroll up, yes. So that's the second one. Anyway, so I'm just going to summarize it. Basically, the PR works, but in a non-conditional way. So I have almost something that is working locally. I need to finalize the testing and so on because I've started using the Docker Compose of Write 5, basically trying to make it conditional if the Docker socket would be mounted or not, so that we can test both cases. And I'm almost done with it. So I have a test that is going to be also enabled and only when we are in that situation, because for instance, the Docker pull or run wouldn't work when the socket is not mounted. And what I wanted to say about that too, yeah, okay, and then finalize the Jenkins file so that we use a simpler way and the make so that we can run both combinatorials in CI constantly. So it also triggered a lot of thoughts because maybe the Docker case is even more convoluted than the upcoming others, like AWS, because I needed to somehow expose the Docker socket to the user space, and Jenkins is not a root, it's not running as root, which made it a bit more complex than it would have been, because I need to control something which is like system level, which I think we won't have to do for automatically configuring things like AWS or Azure or DigitalOcean or whatever, because we just will need somehow, some kind of key, and that will be.
I get what you're saying. I'm somewhat fine with us saying, if you want this to work correctly, some user has to have access to the Docker socket or something like that. Like we can push requirements to the user here.
Yes. So the alternative of what I've been doing, because I've been using indeed Socat to create a somewhat hackish solution by forwarding the Unix socket to a locally exposed HTTP port. The alternative is, I'm not sure it's acceptable. That's why I ended up doing that. The alternative is to ask users to basically do a chmod a plus rw on /var/run/docker.soc, which I'm not sure is going to be a very successful approach because maybe people will be afraid. So that's it. I'm not sure what you think about that, but.
Is this written down? Some of the pros and cons of this in these?
Not per se as a JEP, but I've put some comments here and there in the code. But I definitely also intended to probably start a JEP at some point. But I'm not sure yet. I don't know what you think, what you people think here. Either I start a JEP for describing the specific case of Docker, or I wait a bit more and implement the AWS case, and then try to write some generic JEP to try and explain how we would automatically configure things like clouds. So there's, I guess, maybe both. I'm not sure.
I definitely think the latter is more important, sort of describing how we auto-configure.
I'm sorry, Tyler, I really have a hard time understanding what you're saying, so I'm not sure for others.
The sound is really weird. Sorry, guys.
For everybody or only for Tyler?
It's for me as well. Hey, what's happening here? Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can.
Tyler, can you say again what you just said, slightly slower, maybe?
I suggest doing a JEP for the cloud configuration in general.
Yes.
And then just for Docker in particular, I think if you write down in the pull request or in the Jira some of the comparisons or some of the ways that we could configure this, just I want to make sure I understand what the pros and cons are from the user perspective
Sure.
before I don't think we need a JEP for Docker in particular.
Yeah.
When I originally pulled this Docker configuration in for the for milestone 1, it was really to make sure that we had some sort of example. It's not the destination as far as I'm concerned. It was just I thought it was going to be the easier first one to tackle.
Yeah. Actually, I thought the same, so I understand where you're coming from. But in the end, I ended up realizing it might be the worst case. I mean, the worst, the most complex one to set up. Because indeed, of the case that you are, as we are using, as I said, as user, then it's not accessible and so on. It kind of made the whole thing more complex. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my hesitation is about the automatically configure part. I mean, to me, it feels like what we should be providing is a package of essentials. And if your environment that you're installing in is an environment that's defined as there is a Docker host, but there is not a public named cloud service or something like that, then we need to be providing a package in some format, whether that's a compose file or what have you, that includes all of the configuration of agents as part of the package rather than necessarily as part of some plugin.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So it would mean in our case that right now what I'm indeed leaning towards is to configuring things in a indeed somewhat runtime way. And you're saying we should rather do publishing many images and do it in a kind of static way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there might need to be some runtime code to handle the trigger, to handle the actual cloud configuration, perhaps. I'm just saying that the trigger for this and the actual source of information should be something that's static in the image, however you want to define that we ship.
Yeah, in my mind, I
agree
was
with that, Jesse, by the way. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And it makes it a slightly more indeed Docker compliant. I mean, in the meaning that Docker should not be, we should not be trying to do too many things at runtime, but trying to test things upstream, and it will make sense that in that meaning. Yeah. But at the same time, we're doing so many things at runtime.
Yeah, for example, there's some code in Docker Workflow plugin that does try to auto detect the host environment, and so depending on detection of stuff, it automatically switches the behavior of the with container step to use which Docker option is it, to use volumes from option to Docker instead of a plain volume mount to try to share volumes. But it's really tricky. It has to do a lot of magical stuff where it's like inspecting the proc file system, and we've had like 13 pull requests to change that behavior to account for subtle changes in Docker, etc. It's just a mess.
Yeah, I like that idea. So I'm gonna try and see how I can adjust the work, or maybe just push what I have and then iterate again to kind of keep the history for future archaeology. But yes, thanks for the feedback. It's interesting. And for other things, so maybe you can jump to Olivier on that one, Tyler. because I believe Olivier has tight agenda, so he should be free to go as soon as possible.
Why don't you introduce the topic, Baptiste?
Yeah, right. Sorry. So because we now are starting to have the telemetry logging working. I mean, from the code side, nothing is deployed yet. We will soon have a need to actually make it useful for developers. So we want to provide access to a handful or selected developers to actually use that data. And so we don't have really anything yet about that. So we are trying to see how we could use the existing setup in the Jenkins project, Kubernetes cluster infra, to see how we could push logs there in some way and make only the logs from Essentials accessible to plugin developers, some plugin developers, and not everything from the Jenkins infrastructure. And that's what Olivier has been having a look at a bit. But yeah, so
last week I had a look at that, and so there is no easy way to separate the logs from the Jenkins infra for Evergreen. But what could be easily done is to deploy a new FreeND next to your service and just send the logs to the log analytics. So it can be quite easy to deploy a new log analytics workspace and send the logs there. We need to agree about the schema that you want to send on log analytics. And so, yeah, I think there is no big issue to do that. So. But I wouldn't reuse what we already did for the Jenkins infra project.
I see. So,
and there is also another thing that I was to forget to tell is that there is no easy way to integrate that with our current LDAP. So what we can do at the moment is we can use a Microsoft account as guest user on the dashboard, so we can provide a read-only access to that dashboard. So that's so for me too.
Baptiste, I want to step back from this approach in particular. Did you evaluate using any external service like Sentry or Bugsnag or anything else instead of trying to look at these as actual logs, but instead look at these as errors?
Because for now we wanted, from what I understood, you thought would be needed, was try and integrate to the current setup and make things simple. But if you think it makes sense to try and basically send logs elsewhere, I can look into that.
Well, what I'm saying is, it sounds like it's not as simple.
Yes, exactly. So because initially my hope was that we could be able to send things with just a specific tag to the existing Azure Log Analytics, but it seems not indeed to be the case. So now indeed we kind of have that information. We can indeed try looking for alternatives, like sending indeed to existing SaaS solutions or yeah, I guess it's the easiest path.
Is there any budget for that? I mean, what would be the limit to use a SaaS service, or should we look for? I mean, what would be the approach to use a SaaS service?
What has worked fairly successfully in the past is to find a service we like and then ask them for access. And then that's typically gotten us, I mean, that's how we got PagerDuty and Datadog integrated. There's a lot of people that are willing to give us a very cheap free account for
because in that case Datadog also provide a way to analyze logs and create dashboard based on your logs. So this is something that we can request.
Yes, definitely. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what you exactly mean, Tyler. If you mean that we would just create a freemium account and use it for testing, or we would ask maybe then Datadog to if they are ready to sponsor the Jenkins project with some, non-simple, a bit more than.
So we already use Datadog, but what I was thinking more was when I first sketched out this telemetry service, it was using Sentry.
Yeah, also because sorry, go on.
There are services which are much more, I'd say, specialized for handling exceptions and errors. So if we stop calling them logs for a second and call them errors, and you search for services that handle errors, there's a number of them which might be better suited to our needs. That if it's not easy to integrate with our existing infrastructure, it would be worth spending an hour or two evaluating a couple of them.
Okay, I will do that then. And I remember for what it's worth about, we already discussed a bit Datadog with Olivier, and he was basically saying that there's nothing, it's similar to the other existing Kubernetes solution. Datadog would require to create a kind of a new account because there's no way from the analysis that to segregate data, depending on who's logged in.
Do we need Olivier for more things?
Sorry?
Do we need Olivier for more things?
No, I don't think so, because if this is now to test solutions that just need to create account for and so on, I don't think I need to bother Olivier. I needed definitely Olivier for the existing access to the infrastructure, but I don't think I really need to bother him if it if it means testing Datadog or testing Sentry more realistically. Yeah.
Okay.
You're free to go, Olivier. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you, Olivier.
All right. What else do we have, Baptiste, or is that covers it for you?
So there was a quality bar ongoing. I guess you want to have a look at some point with your kind of PM cap, Tyler, to try and see if you think, there's nothing obvious missing that would be, a really, really showstopper, at that stage. And I guess that would be it, because then we can further the analysis, detailing on each P1 case, what are the, the risks associated to it, and so on.
Right. Is that something you need me to get to this week?
Sorry, I'm not sure I get important.
Is that something you need to? Is this a thing I should be looking at this week?
Depends. I'm not blocked anyway. I can do everything else. So it depends on your schedule and your level of activity elsewhere. I guess at some point we will want to have a look at that to kind of say, yes, the milestone 1 is done for real, and we have tested everything and thought about the risky aspects. But I guess I can do everything else in the meantime. Everything on the left can be done, and I'm not blocked by this per se.
Okay. Jesse, do you have things that you've been working on related to Jenkins Essentials, or are you just sort of floating around?
No, nothing in that area.
Okay. I know we had discussed a little bit last week this ingest YAML file. Ooh, if I can find it. There we go. And I know we had chatted a little bit about a tool that would generate this from some bill of materials. And just as I think I mentioned this last week in the GitHub channel, I don't really need any tool to generate this right now. I can create a hard-coded version that we can work with just to move forward.
Yeah, once we have stuff running and are actually actively pushing core and plugin changes into this, then it will become more urgent to have going for it.
Right.
Writing a tool to do that is probably very little work. It's just there's no defined source of input for it yet. So.
Okay, then from my side, Baptiste, you may have seen some of my work on getting the essential or the ingest YAML into the update service. I started adding to JEP 307 to accommodate how the update levels are created inside of the update service on Thursday and Friday of last week. I anticipate that that's going to be what I'm going to be spending time working on this week. And then what I don't have a good sense of is whether I should prioritize this, the deployment of the backend services, or if I should spend some time on these other tasks. Like, I don't know how useful it is for us to have a production environment right now.
That's a good question. Because for the upcoming talks I have, I was wondering if it would make sense to have some, demoable environment, like, only starting the client, the Docker run something, which would automatically connect to the evergreen.jenkins.io or evergreen-beta, if you want to make it clear.
Your talk is next week, isn't it?
Yes, at the actual talk, but I have beta talks before. That doesn't mind, because the other one I'm going to do locally or something, but it could make sense. I'm not sure. I'm saying it's definitely, it's the 13th. You're looking for the exact number of hours we have left?
Yeah, I got to start the countdown timer. Okay, I forgot. If you want to have something to where you can talk with people at EclipseCon, then I'll prioritize getting Evergreen Jenkins IO deployed, so that someone could actually just pull the image and at least pull the initial version of stuff that's hard coded. I think that would be cool.
Why the reason why I wasn't really definitive about my answer just a few seconds ago is that anyway, to have a really full pre-alpha demo, I would say, what would be awesome is to have the Jenkins, the service deployed, and a way to update the update level so that I can actually trigger an update. But we are kind of still a bit far from that. You should see what I mean.
Yeah, so the work that I'm doing right now, I think would allow you to run that full update cycle locally.
Exactly.
So that should be done this week for sure.
That would be great. Because even with duct tape here and there, I mean, it's very I can explain we are still at an early stage, but that's very okay. I mean, but yeah, if I have something to demonstrate, that would be great.
I'll make sure you've got a duct tape version of this for EclipseCon.
Conference-driven development, as always.
So outside of that, in theory, in a couple of weeks after EclipseCon, Cloudbooz has hired another developer that will be able to work on this with us. So finally, we might have somebody else besides Baptiste and Jesse in this call. But that's looking like she's going to start after EclipseCon, so you won't get any of that benefit for EclipseCon, Baptiste.
That's okay. I'm playing with duct tape for some weeks, so that's okay.
Yeah. So outside of that, I don't know if there's anything else that we need to discuss. It sounds like we're not blocking each other necessarily right now, but maybe towards the end of the week, we should talk about error tracking services, Baptiste.
Carefully. Can you please repeat?
Towards the end of the week, maybe we should just jump on a hangout and talk about what you've learned about error tracking services.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if that's it for the day, then I'll see y'all later.
Bye bye. See you.
Right.
Bye.